If you're dealing with people pleasing anxiety and you're looking for a proven way to actually be able to overcome it, then you are 1000% in the right place today. My name is Ty Hicks, founder of Mental Health Coaching, and I'm really glad that you're here. I'm also not going to waste your time with a long intro. I just want to make sure we get right into it. So, as you can see, the title of today's presentation is Free from People Pleasing Anxiety in 90 Days, the method that 612 people have used when therapy, medications, and coping mechanisms failed them, all by identifying the hidden game that your subconscious keeps playing and rewriting the rules. Okay. Now, if I heard someone claim that the underlying core of anxiety could be overcome in 90 days back when I was still struggling with my own anxiety, I probably would have thought to myself, there's absolutely no way. This is total BS. How in the world can this guy claim that something I've been struggling with for years could be overcome in just 90 days? And I want to just point out right out of the gate here that if you're skeptical, I totally get it. After all, I mean, you have probably tried just about every damn thing you can possibly think of to deal with your anxiety already. And you probably have no clue, who I am, how this process works yet. So, of course, it's not going to sound believable. But I do want to tell you that we have very hard-hitting proof that this works. So, for starters, I used to have extreme anxiety and immense insecurity for years. And the method I'll be teaching you today really helped me finally overcome my anxiety after years of continued use of therapy, medication, and coping mechanisms just really did not work. And then, in addition to myself, in the past 8 years of doing this professionally, I've had 612 clients I've worked with one on one where we've applied this method. And what we do is we survey them before they start the process and of implementing this method that I'm going to be teaching you today to assess how severe their anxiety is. And then what we also do is we survey them after they've finished implementing this system. And the typical minimum result that they will report is a reduction in both the severity and the frequency of the anxiety by 75%. So most clients do a lot better than the 75% reduction, but that's kind of the minimum typical result that our client will experience after we fully install this system. So if that sounds unbelievable, what I really invite you to do is you're always welcome to go to our website anytime you want. You can see that we have 241 documented case studies and testimonials where people describe their experience directly in their own words. And we have maintained a 5-star rating for the 8 years that I've been in business working online as well. And the results that this method produce are totally, completely transparent. And unlike any other company out there, assisting people with their mental health. So anytime you want, you can just go to ty-hicks.com/testimonies. You can see it all right there, verify it for yourself. It's all there. And while we do have countless documented proven case studies of the method I'm going to show you today working for all anxiety types, and we keep adding more every single week, what's really, really cool is that people pleasing anxiety is one of the most common types of issues that our clients come to us to have us solve for them. So today I'm going to be helping you really understand why people pleasing anxiety, it tends to come back. Why it feels so exhausting, why everything you've tried so far has probably failed. And more importantly than that, I'm really going to be walking you through the new proven way to get rid of it for once and for all that is just working incredibly well for people like you. And we've just seen it in action so many times. So let's just go ahead and dive in and talk about exactly how to do that. Now, first off, who is this for? Okay, just so that that you feel like you're absolutely in the right place and you know that this is the right information for you. Well, first of all, this is for anybody who's constantly stuck in the grip of people pleasing, right? The kind that keeps your mind racing and your stomach tight, like you're always one wrong word away from disappointing someone that you really care about. Perhaps you've tried boundary setting, you've tried therapy, you've tried communication tips, or maybe you've just tried telling yourself to care less. Maybe some of that has helped you a little bit, but none of it has really been enough to quiet that like deep down fear of being rejected, judged, or misunderstood. This is also for you if you constantly feel like you're performing like emotional gymnastics, basically, you're trying to keep everyone happy all the time, you get anxious even about saying no to people, and then you start getting anxious about getting anxious, right? Maybe you even worry that your anxiety is being a burden to other people as well. Okay, this is for you if someone being like slightly off, right? Any kind of change in their tone or their energy with you makes your mind spiral, into wondering what in the world you did wrong. If you have a tendency to immediately blame yourself for other people's moods, and also if you find yourself, rewording, texts or emails five, six, seven times, just to make sure there's no possibility it's going to hurt someone's feelings, trying to have absolute control over how they perceive you. Or if you ever feel like you keep quiet about what you really needed to say just to try to avoid conflict. Okay. And lastly, if you feel like you've worn the label of the nice one or the reliable one, like a badge of honor, but deep down it feels kind of prison-like. And if you just can't really seem to shake that feeling that your self-worth and your self-esteem really just depends on other people's opinions. Like you value other people's opinions about you more than you value your own opinion about you. And you really feel that you have to have their approval or else you just can't simply stand it. Like you have a tough time functioning. If that's really you, then I just want to let you know, I know where you're at. I see you. I get you. I've been there. You're definitely in the right place. Okay. And today we are going to be answering the most important question for overcoming your anxiety. Now, whether you realize this is the most important question for overcoming your anxiety or not, this is absolutely what it is. Okay. And so here's the real question that you want to ask yourself. How do we stop trying to respond to all of these surface level symptoms and all of the, individual anxious thoughts that pop up? And how do we finally eliminate the anxiety at the source? Okay, that is the most important question. Because if you have people pleasing anxiety, you already know that your mind continuously has automatic negative thoughts that are totally involuntary, and you probably waste a ton of time and energy constantly reacting to those automatic thoughts. And so the entire idea behind a coping mechanism is to be able to respond to those anxious thoughts in a way that brings some kind of relief. Now, let's just think about it for a second. If you knew how to finally address the true source of the anxiety, where your mind is no longer automatically generating the anxious thoughts to begin with, well, I mean, you would basically have no more limitations on being able to live the life that you want to live, right? You would have no more need for using all of the coping mechanisms either, right? So, but I just want to take this one step further as well. Not just how do we do this, and not just how do we do this in 90 days or less, but how do we do it in a very simple, very easy, common sense, yet proven way that's really going to last? That's what's really, really important. Okay, how do we do this without you having to rely on some kind of band-aid solution like medication may have been for you up until now, where you trade one unwanted feeling for a series of unwanted side effects? How do we do this without you feeling like you're just sitting in a room with a therapist talking about the same stuff over and over, waiting endlessly to be given some clarity, to be given a real plan, when instead it just feels like you are basically spinning your wheels forever? How do we do this without, doing something completely bizarre and like a total Hail Mary, like hypnosis, energy work, acupuncture, any of these other kind of crazy things you see out in the world that hey, I'm sure they probably provide some value, but let's be honest, they're not really dealing with the source of the problem. Okay. And how do we do this without exerting a lot of effort, right? Like using some kind of crazy exposure therapy system might use, or just having to rely on a bunch of willpower. Okay. That's really the question that we're going to answer today. And again, just in case you're still thinking this is not possible to do, I just want to take a little extra second to provide some more context, introduce myself really briefly, just so you can kind of know where all of this is coming from. So, like I said before, my name is Ty Hicks. I'm the founder of Mental Health Coaching. And I want you to understand that The anxiety that I used to deal with before was really, really debilitating to the point that it made me suicidal. It landed me in a psych hospital for 10 days when my suicide plan was interrupted. And out of all of the different types of anxiety that I dealt with, people pleasing has honestly been the absolute strongest. So in a very real way, the entire method that I built over the years to help myself and help other people was first inspired and generated to deal with this particular type of anxiety. I tried therapy at the time, multiple medications. I did those for years. They didn't really work for me. I really felt almost no effect at all, positively from the medication. And, my therapist was a nice guy and everything, but it just didn't really give me anything tangible that I could really use. And it was only once I developed the process that I'm going to be teaching you today that I finally overcame the anxiety. And ever since then, I've stayed anxiety free for over 15 years without medications, therapy, or coping mechanisms. And, don't get me wrong, like my life is not perfect. I'm still human. I have the occasional negative thought or feeling here or there, but the difference is I no longer have that repetitive, limiting, ruminating anxiety, right? Like I no longer have what we refer to as capital A anxiety, if that makes sense. Just the normal stuff, that you're supposed to have, like feeling a little worried when a car almost hits me in traffic, right? And even then, it only lasts for a few seconds, and then I feel calm pretty immediately afterwards. I definitely no longer feel, this insane urge to try to please everybody all the time. I'm not constantly assessing everybody's opinion always. And my sense of self-worth is not up for negotiation anymore like it used to be. And when I'm making my choices, it's based off of what I know is the right thing, not what I think is going to, cause nobody to ever be able to be upset with me ever. And as I said a second ago, right, I've also over the past 8 years helped 612 clients use this process I'm about to share with you. I even taught it to Olympic athlete Abby Napton to help her overcome her performance anxiety and land a spot on the diving team of Team USA, which was really cool. She happened to be a friend of a friend who was a client of mine and got referred to me, and that was really cool. Took us about 9 weeks to get her anxiety dealt with. And I want you to know too, I want you to be warned about this because our process that we've been teaching for so long is working better than basically anything else out there. I've gotten a ton of copycats over the years, but really almost no one gets it right. And what I'm going to be doing is showing you the fastest and most effective way to really do this. But before I dig into that, let's quickly talk about, what doesn't work because I think that stopping what doesn't work is very often the fastest way to speed up progress. And most people are completely misinformed. About 90% of what's being taught in the mental health industry right now is just not working or it's taking way, way, way too long. But people have no clue what the real dangers are of the sort of common methods out there. And they have no clue that there's a much more proven, much more reliable alternative that works so much better. So I want to cover this with you because there's so many ads out there, there's so much content, there's so many people trying to rope you into one strategy or another. And I just don't really think I'd really be doing my job as an industry leader if I didn't make it really clear to you what works and what doesn't. So, firstly, let's just talk through, what's happening in the industry right now, what is going on. So, there's basically three main things that have been happening in recent years that I think are completely ruining people's mental health and sending them down the wrong path. So, the very first thing that's been happening is that the rate of prescriptions has been changing. And the rate of prescriptions that's been being thrown at anxious people has now never been higher than it's ever been. So, ever since the COVID pandemic, more and more people are getting prescribed anti-anxiety medication, even though the documented results for those medications being effective has never been lower. So, in fact, behavioral health business did a study and found that antidepressant prescriptions increased by approximately 21% from 2019 to 2022, with a notable rise in telehealth prescriptions from 1.5% in 2019 to 31.4% in 2022. And what's interesting is even though the pandemic is over and has been for some time, that trend has actually continued ever since. And that's because well-meaning people like yourself who just want to feel some kind of relief, they just want to feel normal, they mistakenly believe that the source of the anxiety is biochemical, even though this is empirically, unequivocally false. Okay, so let me explain. So most people have no clue about this, but a recent peer-reviewed medical meta study, which if you're not familiar, this is basically the highest caliber grade of academic research that there is. It means that this research was done by a group of medically trained researchers. It was empirically proven by them, and then it was also submitted and peer-reviewed by their peers. So this is the real deal, okay? And what they found is that, quote, there is no conclusive evidence that low serotonin levels cause depression or anxiety. Despite the popularity of the serotonin theory, research suggests no significant difference in serotonin activity between those with and without depression and anxiety. Furthermore, the chemical imbalance theory was heavily promoted by pharmaceutical companies in the 1990s to market SSRIs, even though studies now show that SSRIs do not correct a serotonin imbalance. And then the study continues to go on to say, quote, clinical trials have demonstrated that antidepressants, SSRIs, are often barely distinguishable from placebos in terms of effectiveness. Now, this is from the University of College London. Okay. Now, even more research beyond that study has mounted and backed this up. So, this is a quote from Molecular Psychiatry. The serotonin theory is not supported by scientific evidence and should no longer be presented as a factual explanation of depression or anxiety. And then here's a final quote here from Science Daily, which is SSRIs and similar treatments only have any kind of positive effect in about 50% of patients, and only 25% achieve full symptom relief. Okay. And even though all of this has been reproven in the early and mid 2020s, it was actually proven previously back in 2015 and as well in 2005. So this idea that anxiety is a biochemical issue has been a myth that's been pushed for a couple decades now. Okay, about half a century actually. And so research even all the way back in 2015 proved that this was a problem, and even further back as 2005. So one pair of researchers in 2015 found that, quote, the FDA had simply accepted aspirational language that anti-anxiety medications help to restore the brain's chemical balance and bring serotonin levels closer to normal, even though both claims were and remain scientifically meaningless. There is no such thing as a scientifically established correct balance of serotonin. Okay, that was from research in 2015. So, what I want you to understand is that the entire theory that anxiety was caused by a biochemical imbalance and could be corrected by medication is a myth. It was a theory, okay? And it was a very convenient theory because it has sold, I don't know, several billion dollars worth of pharmaceutical products over the past 50 years, but it was never proven. It was just a theory. There was no research that ever corroborated that whatsoever. Okay, and actually, it has been disproven by at least three different independent researchers in the past 25 years. And I want to be very clear, like right out of the gate, because usually when people hear this and they learn about this, they're kind of shocked because they've had a relationship with their doctor or psychiatrist for years or maybe even decades. And, they've continued, the doctor or psychiatrist has probably continued to monitor you and, give you recommendations. And they've told you, oh, well, this drug will do this and this drug will do that. And I want to be very clear, like I am not blaming, doctors and psychiatrists for prescribing this stuff. So please don't get mad at your doctors. It's important to understand that, doctors and psychiatrists largely operate by doing three simple things. So the first thing is they really try to help their patients, right? They're good people. They try to help their patients feel better with whatever tools they have available. And they may not have a ton of tools available, but one tool they do have is the ability to write a prescription. The second thing that they tend to do is they tend to recommend things that they know that other doctors are doing to try to help their patients. So there tends to be a lot of inertia in the industry, if that makes sense. Like as soon as some doctors are doing it, then a lot of doctors start to do it as well. And then third, they keep recommending what they are used to recommending, especially if they don't have a better alternative. Right. So this is interesting. Researchers interviewed a couple psychiatrists about this to kind of ask them, like, hey, we've now got all this data that's showing that anti-anxiety medication is really not that effective for most people. And it doesn't even correct the source of the issue. So what's going on? Why are we prescribing this for people? And this was an interesting quote that came from Daniel Carlat, and this was in Science Daily when asked about this subject. So he's a psychiatrist, and he said, quote, "We don't know how the medications actually work in the brain. I'll often say something to my patients like, the way Zoloft works is it increases the level of serotonin in your brain, and presumably the reason that you're depressed or anxious is that you have some sort of deficiency. And I tell them that not because I really believe it, but because I know the evidence really isn't there for us to understand the mechanism. But I think I say that because patients want to know something, right? They want to know that as physicians, we have some basic understanding of what we are doing when we are prescribing medications. They certainly don't want to know that a psychiatrist essentially has no idea how these medications work. Okay, end quote. So, in short, doctors are just doing what doctors are trained to do, diagnose and prescribe medication. They just don't know how to actually get to the real root of the subconscious problem. It's not their expertise, it's not their specialty. They just look at anxiety as if it's the same as diabetes or heart disease, and it's not. All right, they prescribe drugs because they're trying to use any tool in their tool belt that might produce results. And especially when COVID happened, a lot of people's anxiety started to flare up massively. And so they were just trying to get people some form of relief in whatever the way they could. So the bottom line is, quote, SSRIs and similar treatments are only somewhat effective in about 50% of patients, and only 25% achieve full symptom relief, end quote. That's from Science Daily. But no one knows this, right? That's the big problem. Patients with anxiety, they simply assume that their doctors are giving them a solution to their anxiety problem when they get a prescription, now more than ever, because more and more people are getting diagnosed and, looking to prescriptions as their first mode of recourse usually. But the patients dealing with anxiety, they just have no clue that it is like statistically a coin flip. Literally, it is a 50-50 shot whether the medications will help you at all, and it is less than a 25% chance that the medications will give you a real lasting solution. And not only that, but since this trend of prescribing medication that doesn't even solve the real problem has now been going on for 50 some odd years, right? This whole theory that anxiety has been a biochemical issue has been around, I believe, since the mid 70s, right? And the challenge is now we're seeing a lot of the byproducts of people being on these drugs for years or decades. And there is now empirical research that has linked anti-anxiety medication to an increased chance of developing Alzheimer's, cardiovascular issues, cognitive impairment, dementia, and of course, really, really scary stuff. I've had a couple clients who've come to me who had this stuff, serotonin syndrome, massively scary, and then tardive dyskinesia, where you basically lose motor function due to an over and exposure of anti-anxiety medications, certain medications. So, not to mention the physical dependence, right, and the need to slowly taper off that it creates when it's not even solving the real problem, right? So most people do what I call playing the pharmaceutical lottery, right? They just think that they should do whatever their doctor recommends and that they will find the right medication cocktail eventually. And this works for some people, but most people will waste months or years tweaking with their dosages and prescriptions only to get very small improvements in their results. But if we think about this for a second, like why in the world would we ingest something into our body for years and years that isn't even solving the problem, right? It gives us weird side effects. Most doctors agree you won't be able to take it forever anyway. And it literally causes your body to have a physical addiction to it, right? It just does not make any sense. And if we just think about it from a common sense perspective too, how is taking any kind of a pill going to get you to stop compulsively chasing after other people's approval? How is taking a pill going to fix your lack of self-esteem? It just does not make any sense. Okay. Now, to be 100% clear, I want to be very clear here. I am in no way recommending, that you leave this video, you go to your medicine cabinet, you flush your pills down the drain. Okay. You stop your prescriptions cold turkey. No, that's not what I'm saying. So even for the clients that I work with one-on-one, where I help them get to the real root of the anxiety, when they use the method I'm going to be teaching you today, I always tell them, we have to deal with the real root of the anxiety problem first. Then you need to work with your doctor to responsibly wean off your medications so that you don't experience a complication due to a withdrawal. So, about 83% of our clients will be off their medication in full within 6 months. And then over 90% are off of it within 12 months. It's just that people have to wean off at different levels depending on what they've been exposed to. So do not in any way, don't stop taking your prescribed medication and don't start weaning off until you take the steps necessary to address the real problem, until you implement the method I'm going to teach you today, or else you're going to make things way, way, way worse for yourself. Okay. And it's very dangerous to do that. So just know in the meantime, though, that if you have been trying to solve your anxiety problem with medication and it has not worked, that does not mean you're defective. It means you are a part of the majority, right? It means you are a part of the 75% of the population that medication is just insufficient for, and that is in no way your fault, okay? So medication is leaving people high and dry. It certainly did for me. So what other options is the industry providing these days? Well, secondly, a lot of people naturally turn to some form of talk therapy. So, therapy is going through a couple changes, and it is interestingly by far the oldest method out there for trying to deal with anxiety. It was created in the late 1880s, if you can believe it. And while most people don't realize this, in many ways, it has not changed a whole lot since then. I mean, it is a very ancient practice. Now, a lot of people have had a lot of hope recently because when you look at what's going on in the media, it seems like there are a lot of new methods and approaches with therapy out there. But that's a little bit smoke and mirrors because what really is going on is that there's a lot of innovation happening in the marketing methods, not necessarily innovation in the core method being used. So the first thing is there's big companies that have made talk therapy way more accessible through telehealth, like Talkspace and BetterHelp. And on top of that, in the past 20 or so years, there have been very slight variations of the talk therapy model that have popped up, things like DBT, EMDR, hypnotherapy, and the like. Okay. So a lot of people believe that these variations are like the missing link that have kept them from anxiety recovery. But interestingly, when you look at the data, the overwhelming amount of people are just not finding talk therapy or these other variations to be sufficient. So, according to the National Health Service in England, quote, despite the widespread use of talk therapy, improvement rates for anxiety remain below 50%, indicating the need for more comprehensive treatment options. Now, that was from the National Health Service in England, okay? And then, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, quote, many patients report feeling that they have plateaued with talk therapy after several months, with dissatisfaction stemming from its inability to address the root cause of anxiety, particularly in more severe cases. Additionally, patients often report that while talk therapy helps them cope, it doesn't provide the tools necessary to fully overcome the anxiety. Okay. End quote. And in the 8 years of my professional career, I've done about 21,000 hours of documented consulting and coaching with people who have severe anxiety. And well over 75% of the people I've spoken with report that therapy has been somewhat helpful, but far from sufficient to provide them lasting relief from anxiety. There are some people who find therapy to be very helpful, but there is a very large portion of the population, the majority, in fact, who never find therapy to be sufficient. And especially for people-pleasing anxiety, talk therapy is notoriously insufficient. Okay, so why is it that so many people are not getting results? Like, what is going on here? Well, most people with people-pleasing anxiety don't realize is that there are two key things that keep therapists from being able to truly help some of their patients experience lasting relief, even though the therapists themselves truly do care about their patients and they really do want what is best for them. So, I want to be very clear. It's neither the therapist's fault nor is it the patient's fault. It's just that the entire system has some major limitations baked into it that were basically created a long time ago that keep it from working for everyone. So, the very first major limitation that a lot of people run into with their therapist is what we call the broken patient myth. So, therapists are trained that anxiety is part of a lifelong condition that cannot be overcome. Now, mind you, this theory is over 200 years old. The basis of classifying anxiety as a permanent disorder was Sigmund Freud's work back in the 1880s. And I mean, we didn't have all that much figured out back then, right? Like at the time he came up with that theory, that anxiety was an unchangeable disorder, cigarettes were being prescribed to treat asthma. Bloodletting was still being used as a medical practice, and literally lobotomies were rising in popularity. Okay, so we didn't exactly have the full picture back then. Now, of course, therapists don't do things exactly like Freud did back then, of course, but there are certain key assumptions that are still held on to today that influence therapists' work, including the idea that anxiety is largely unchangeable by the patient or the therapist. Okay, and so this means that every single thing that they are taught in school is based on the premise that your patient will never recover, but you can help them feel a little bit better, right? In other words, cope through indefinite therapy. So let me ask you kind of a simple little question, right? Like, would you ever want to hire a mechanic to work on your car who didn't know how to fix it, who was never trained how to fix it, who was only ever trained to kind of fix it? I mean, I certainly would not, right? No matter how nice the mechanic is, no matter how much the mechanic wants my car to be fixed, if they don't know how to fix the damn car, I'm not giving them the job, okay? So that's the first big limitation is therapists are operating inside of this box. Every tool, every recommendation, everything they do with their patients and their therapists operates inside of this box that assumes you cannot overcome the anxiety. So a lot of people think, well, I just haven't found the right fit. I haven't found the right personality. It has nothing to do with personality. I mean, you could get a different therapist with a different personality, just like you could have a different mechanic with a different personality. The personality is not the important thing, really. It's whether they've been trained to actually help you solve the problem. And none of them really have a viable long-term solution that they've been trained how to do. And the second big thing, kind of related to this, that keeps people with people pleasing anxiety from getting really good results in therapy is what we call the non directive principle. So back in the day, Freud's entire idea, his entire theory was if you just simply sat someone down in the chair, you let them talk and talk and talk. And as long as the therapist did not intervene or direct the session in any kind of way, or provide any sort of concrete advice, that what would happen is the patient would eventually arrive at some new conclusions on their own and work through their issues. I mean, he literally called this the talking cure. So therapists generally just try to get their patients talking, right? And this has been built on many times. Carl Rogers, fairly famous psychologist who worked in the 50s, 1950s, he built on this idea and he basically gave a mandate to therapists saying that they needed to simply hold unconditional positive regard for their patients, right? By simply sitting in a room with their patients, not judging them, wishing them the best, and creating a space for them to explore their thoughts and their feelings, that the healing and the recovery would somehow occur. Okay. And even though today's modern therapists will offer very small bits of advice, it really never goes beyond their standard set of go-to tips and tricks that only offer mild coping at best. So most therapists have like 3 to 5 go-to recommendations that they'll usually do. And so this is why you've probably heard a therapist say things like this, like, be kind to yourself. You can't please everyone. Be sure to do your breathing exercises. Have you tried meditation? You need to get more physical exercise. You need to worry less about what other people think. Practice some self-love, right? So very often therapists give this kind of like surface level stuff that leaves patients kind of feeling like, yeah, easy for you to say. Like, how am I supposed to actually do that? How do I actually make that happen? And there's not really any sort of like concrete plan that's being given. And beyond those standard little bits of advice that they'll usually give, therapists are literally taught to, quote, be like a mirror, reflecting the patient's thoughts and feelings back to them for further exploration. That's what they're taught in school. And that's why you've probably heard things from your therapist more times than you can count, like, how does that make you feel? Or tell me more about that, right? Many, many times before. And in most cases, with people pleasing anxiety, the therapist is also very likely to push you to utilize medication because they don't know any other approach that's really gonna cut it. Okay. So the bottom line here is that there is a major mismatch growing between patients and therapist expectations on what the purpose of therapy is. So patients today are impatient, right? Ironically, and they have every right to be. They want a plan. They want to be normal. They want to live their regular life. They want a roadmap to recovery. But no therapist is trained in how to provide their patients with a true roadmap for lasting recovery. Therapists are literally taught that no such map exists. They are only taught how to help a patient embrace a lifetime of coping. And patients believe, that their therapist has a plan or that some therapist out there somewhere must have a plan. But the truth is, there is no plan that therapists are taught. The therapist, if anything, they believe that you have the plan hidden somewhere inside of you. And the only plan is for you to keep coming to therapy, to keep talking with them in the hopes that eventually, and maybe even almost accidentally, you're going to feel better. Okay. And, to be totally, totally clear, this whole non-directive thing, it does work for some people with some issues. This can be very helpful for processing grief or, some forms of isolated trauma. And as we saw, there is a portion of the population that is able to feel sufficient relief from just talking about it enough. But as we saw in 2024, less than 49% of people reported experiencing sufficiently positive results according to the NHS's study, which leaves over half of people who are suffering out there hung out to dry. I mean, isn't that a little alarming? That really alarms me quite a bit. And the people who keep trying it, right? Like, why do they keep trying it? They don't get very far. They start to think it's their fault. They think it's a matter of mismatched personalities. They think maybe the relief will come eventually. And even though so few people are getting satisfactory results, why in the world do people still keep going to therapy? I mean, what I've found is if you don't feel after 6 months like you are absolutely on the road, like you're very confident you're going to get where you want to go ultimately, it's a very good indicator that therapy is not going to be sufficient for you. But people keep doing it. And I think that the main reasons are number one, it seems free, right? So people will say, well, it's free. Even though it's really not free at all, it's incredibly expensive, right? For one, you very often you will have a copay or something, but even if your insurance covers it in totality, people tend to forget that their time is worth way more than their money, right? Like an hour of your time has a very quantifiable value to you. Like it's probably worth it at least 50 to 100 or several $100s, right? An hour of your time. So it starts to add up, in a very long sense, not to mention the opportunity cost, right? Someone who goes to therapy for 5 years doesn't deal with anxiety. That's 5 years of your life gone, right? That you spent anxious and overwhelmed. That's 5 years of moments of potential joy and connection with people. and relief and hours of sleep, right, that are now lost over those years. So the cost is very, very high. It's just kind of an invisible cost. The second reason why people do it is usually it's just all that the client knows how to do. It seems better to do something rather than nothing. And then finally, the client usually keeps hoping that at some point the breakthrough is going to come. They're basically holding out hope and trusting in their therapist that the therapist has a plan and that something's going to come along, right? But again, imagine your car is broken down. It's not functioning properly. You can't get from A to B. And so what do you do? Well, you go to a mechanic, right? And the mechanic tells you, well, your car is never going to function fully the same way again. But I tell you what, you keep bringing your car back to my shop every week and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Maybe you'll figure out how to fix it yourself if we talk about it for long enough. I'll give you a couple things you can do to kind of fix it. And, some people start to feel better about their broken cars after a while of coming here for a long time. So it might be helpful for you too. Oh, and don't worry, your car insurance is going to cover the weekly appointments. I mean, does that sound like a good plan? I don't think so, and I didn't think so back when I was trying to decide on my career of how I wanted to help people with these issues. I mean, the two major limitations of the broken patient myth and the non-directive principle were why I deliberately chose not to become a therapist and to find my own way to help people get the kind of recovery that I had been able to achieve. Now, I want to be totally clear. I am in no way coming for therapists here. The vast majority of therapists, like I said, are incredibly caring, very intelligent people, and they're just doing what they're trained to do. They're trying to help. Many of them are my colleagues and friends, right? And many of them are effective at helping a portion of the population deal with certain issues. But I also see their struggle and frustration in trying to help a portion of people that they are just not trained in how to deal with. And it's not their fault, that they don't know how to help you. More importantly, it's not your fault that the whole process is just not getting you what you want. So if you've tried therapy and found it somewhat valuable, but far from sufficient to deal with your people pleasing anxiety, just remember you're not alone, right? The data shows that over 50% of people are just like you. And the third thing that's been happening in the industry that is leading people astray is pretty fascinating, but very dangerous as well. And it has to do with what most people do when therapy and medication are not enough. So if you're anything like I was, when my anxiety was at its peak, if you've already tried therapy and medication and those didn't really work well for you, then you've probably tried to solve the anxiety problem yourself. Okay. So, especially in the past 10 years or so, people are trying to be their own therapist or their own mental health coach by trying to turn to the vast abyss of the internet for answers. And if you're like most people with substantial people pleasing anxiety, most of your time on the internet is probably in three main chunks. So the first one is compulsively Googling, the potential source or explanation for your anxiety, hoping to find what the real source of the problem is, and basically becoming convinced of everything from healing your inner child to cutting out caffeine. And so what people do is they end up drowning in information but starving for wisdom, right? The second group of hours that you're spending online is probably being spent doing what we call doom scrolling, right? You're basically looking through funny, distracting, meaningless posts, games, basically to try to help your mind temporarily get distracted from the endless thoughts of not measuring up to what other people expect of you. And then the third would be you're probably spending a good amount of time looking for real, tangible answers on how to feel better, only to find cheesy, surface level content that makes you feel good for an instant or that makes you feel seen or validated. But after months and months of consuming it, your life basically still looks exactly the same. And what you've probably seen is your social media feeds are probably littered with all sorts of motivational, pump up, feel good social media posts. I mean, these days, especially since the COVID pandemic, mental health influencers are basically a dime a dozen. And do you know why? Like, are you familiar with what's going on with this, why this is happening? Because most people are not. So, Firstly, many people like yourself are struggling emotionally, right? Ever since the pandemic, especially, just the rise of anxious people has gone up. And the type of content that most people engage with is simply content that validates how they currently feel. So, what's probably happened is you've probably seen a lot of posts like this before. Uh, in today's world of crushing expectations, it's inevitable that you will not feel good enough. It's not your fault that the world is designed to make you feel unworthy. It's okay not to be perfect. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently. And if they do, it's time to say goodbye. This is a friendly reminder to take a breath, be kind to yourself, and send positive energy out into the world. Okay, you ever seen a post like this? Of course you have, because they all sound like this. And do you know why they all, like, have you noticed that almost all of the stuff everybody's saying sounds exactly the same? It's all put in that same kind of way. The reason is this post, this type of post, is literally strategically crafted not to give you a true step by step system for recovery or even give you anything tangible that you can use to make your life better. It's designed to get you to click the like button and ideally to click the share button. It validates how you already feel without giving you any real way to address the root of the problem. It gives you a little dopamine hit and trains you to get addicted to the content so you keep coming back for more. Now, you'll either see a lot of posts like that, or what you've probably been seeing too is a post like this. Here's X number of signs that you might actually have XYZ exceptionally rare condition you've never heard of. Number one, you feel tired when you wake up in the morning. Number two, you feel hungry multiple times a day, especially after several hours between meals. Number three, you often feel stressed when thinking about day to day responsibilities. Number four, you disagree with others from time to time. Okay, so this type of content is what's causing more and more people to self-diagnose themselves. It's the first time this has ever happened in human history where this is now happening in spades, and it's growing at an alarming rate. 1 in 4 Americans have self-diagnosed a mental health disorder based on information from social media, TikTok being one of the most notable sources. This is from a study done in 2023. It's even higher since then. And by the way, this is creating a vicious cycle, right? What it's causing is it's causing people to consume validation content and consume self-diagnosing content and engage with it. And so what that does is it creates massive followings, massive engagement for these influencers who can then basically make money off of their ad space that their profile is generating. And then what they're able to do is they're then getting reinforced by because their audience is consuming that type of content. And so more and more people are jumping into the industry and saying, oh my gosh, I can create a giant following online about psychology because I took one psych class in middle school and I can talk about that too. And I'll create self-diagnosing content and validation content. And so the entire industry has just gotten full of these people who have no clue what they're talking about, but people will still engage with the content because all you got to do is put up a post that reads like this last one, right? Like anybody can write something like that. It doesn't take any brain cells to do something like that. And what this is doing is it's now causing people to believe that they know what their real problem is when they have actually have no clue, and neither does the person posting the content. Most of these people have no experience working one-on-one with people, actually helping them solve complex, in-depth psychological issues. And most of them have only been around for 6 months, 12 months or less. And I mark my words, I guarantee you the vast majority of them are going to be gone in 5 years because they have no real meat on the bone. They've got no real chops when it comes to helping people. What they do know is they know how to market and they know how to master social media. That's what they know how to do. They don't know how to help people really create lasting transformation. And it's causing problems because I consult with people all the time who come into, a call with me, they're looking for help, but they've got their mind made up that what they really got to do is they have to reparent themselves, or they need to calm their parasympathetic nervous system, or they need to do a caffeine detox. And these people who are consuming this content, they are very well intentioned, but they're being taken advantage of, quite honestly. And the challenge it's creating is it's causing people to feel certain when they have no basis for that certainty. And being certain that you know what the real source of the problem is even more dangerous. Because when you are totally certain that you know what that source of the problem is based off of just a couple posts online, then you're now going to be led astray, right? You're going to be enthusiastically running in the wrong direction. And that's a major, major problem. So I have to remind people, if they really knew what the real problem was that's keeping them anxious, then they wouldn't have the problem anymore, right? The fact that they still have the problem is evidence that they have a blind spot, and that's not their fault. That's okay. It doesn't mean they're dumb or ignorant or anything like that. It just means they're enthusiastically running in the wrong direction, which is really problematic because then that's how you get lost in the woods is enthusiastically running in the wrong direction. That's how you end up in a location you did not intend on ending up. And so, again, the reason your feeds are littered with this stuff is just because influencers know that you want to feel understood and you want to feel some kind of an explanation. But mark my words, this is happening already. And over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see this. The people who continue to prioritize consuming validation based information over transformation based information, those are the people who are going to stay stuck indefinitely. And they're going to be confusing the information that makes them feel good for a couple minutes with the information needed to create lasting recovery. Okay, now let me be clear, I'm not knocking all mental health influencers, right? A lot of them are trying to do good in the world. They are just doing what they are incentivized to do. They create content that will get lots of engagement and they teach band-aids, not how to address the root of the problem. And this is a big, big, big reason why my team and I have actually strategically focused not on building a massive social media following, but instead we have ruthlessly doubled down on making sure the method is bulletproof and that the client success is through the roof. We've refined this method you're going to be learning today year after year after year, making it better and more streamlined. And, there is nothing wrong with consuming a little candy every once in a while that makes you feel good for a few moments, but eventually you got to get your vegetables, right? If you want to be healthy, if you want to prevent disease, and the willingness to go beyond the surface level and address the root problem is really what separates and will continue to separate the people who merely want to recover from those who actually will. So, if our goal is simply to retrain the brain to stop having automatic anxious thoughts in the first place, why don't we just do that as quickly as possible, right? Why don't we just do that? So, what is the method that works when nothing else does? Okay, well, if you're truly serious about not just managing your people pleasing anxiety, but really learning how to overcome it, then there is one simple concept that you have to understand. Okay. Now, this key concept is what enabled me to finally overcome my own anxiety, stay anxiety free for so long. And I have never seen an exception to this with the 612 client successes that we've had. Okay. So, the first key concept you've got to understand is what we call the formula for peace of mind. Okay. Now, I know that sounds sort of silly. It might sound like I'm exaggerating here to say, there's a formula for peace of mind, but if you'll bear with me and just try this on for size, I think you will see that this does work really well. So, what I believe to be the formula for peace of mind is when your current life conditions, as in how your life is right this minute, when that matches up with your subconscious rules for life, that's when you will feel peace of mind. And by the way, too, you don't have to take my word for this either. You can totally verify if this formula is true just by looking at your own experience. So let's just try this on for a second. Okay, so in your life, there's probably at least one area where you are generally satisfied, let's say, right? So it could be your health, could be your finances, could be your business, could be your marriage, could be your relationship with your kids, or at least one of your kids, okay? And not everybody is fully satisfied in every area of their life, especially if anxiety is in your daily life. But we all tend to have at least one area that we are pretty satisfied with. Okay, so hell, it could even just be like one friend that you have or the house you live in. Okay, don't overthink it. So just ask yourself real quick, like, what is one area in your life that you feel generally at peace with? And I'm going to use a real example here. So I had a client a little while ago who had severe people-pleasing anxiety, one of the most severe I'd ever seen. And her name was Sandy. Now, Sandy has shared her story publicly and given us her blessing to talk about her situation. Okay. And when I asked her, hey, what's an area of life that she was generally pleased with? When I asked her that, she said, my relationship with my daughter. And I said, great. What is it that you really love about your relationship with your daughter? And she said, well, let's see. We usually talk once a day. We tell each other pretty much everything. I see her about once a month or so, sometimes more. She lets me babysit my little grandson. And so I said, okay, cool. That's awesome. And so said to Sandy, I said, great. Now, just imagine for a second. I want you to imagine that if you went from speaking daily to only once every couple of weeks. Okay. Imagine if you went from seeing her once a month in person to seeing her in person once or twice a year. Imagine if, all of a sudden the conversation changed with your daughter. She didn't really open up about the same things that she does currently. If she didn't really let you babysit your grandson anymore, okay, would that make you upset and anxious? And Sandy thought for a second and she said, yeah, absolutely, I would. And so the reason why it would have created anxiety for her is because up until that moment, right, Sandy's subconscious rules for her relationship with her daughter had been my daughter should speak with me most days. My daughter and I should see each other at least once a month. My daughter should feel like I can, or excuse me, my daughter should feel like she can tell me anything. My daughter should let me babysit my grandson. Okay. And those rules had become a big part of Sandy's subconscious beliefs that she built up as she went through her life. And all a rule is, by the way, is it's a subconscious belief about what has to happen, what must happen, basically. Okay, so because this particular area of Sandy's life matched up with her subconscious rules, she felt happy about her relationship with her daughter. She did not feel anxiety or unrest or overwhelm around her relationship with her daughter. She didn't spend a lot of time in her head thinking about it. And the thing, though, is that if these core expectations were all of a sudden not met, then you can bet your bottom dollar that it would cause Sandy anxiety. And by the way, this goes for whichever area of life you picked as well, too. If all of a sudden that area you are generally pleased with no longer was meeting your expectations, you can definitely bet you're going to start feeling anxiety about it. You're going to have intrusive thoughts about it. And what would have ended up happening is her mind would be ruminating about her daughter all the time. She'd be having thoughts like, what's going wrong? What has changed? Do they not like me anymore? What did I do wrong? Okay, things like that. If the rules were not being met and Sandy didn't change the relationship with her daughter to get them to match up again, or she didn't change her subconscious rules, then there would be a lot of anxiety. And it would start to consume more and more of her mind as her mind tried to figure out a way to balance the formula. That's what creates anxiety. Okay, does that make sense? So if you look at the things that you have anxious thoughts about, it's because there is an unmet set of subconscious rules. I promise you. Okay. Now they are more than likely subconscious, not just more than likely, they are for sure subconscious, meaning that you are unaware of what they are. Okay. Just like Sandy was unaware of her subconscious rules. Okay. But they are there. Okay. So more on that in a second. So what I was able to do is I was able to show Sandy why she was pleased with her daughter. But when we took a look at the anxiety that Sandy was dealing with in other areas of her life, it became pretty clear that there were a different set of subconscious rules that were being violated consistently elsewhere in her life. Okay, so she told me a couple things. She told me firstly that, especially at work and then also with her husband, it was a totally different story. She was constantly replaying her actions in her head, wondering if she said or did the right thing. She basically felt an inability to stand her ground on things that felt important. She was literally working herself to death. Okay. Like without exaggeration, she had ended up in the ER twice because she was working 80 plus hour weeks, forgetting to eat. And she was doing all this because she felt like she couldn't say no to her boss when he was asking for her to take on extra shifts. Okay. That's so it was the first time I'd ever seen people pleasing anxiety like be that dangerous. Well, actually, I suppose not. Sometimes it causes people to stay in abusive relationships and things like that. But anyway, that's beside the point. She told me also whenever she was in a situation where someone might be disappointed or upset with her, her mind would instantly jump to everything she might have done or said that was wrong. She told me that as soon as she felt even the slightest tension in a relationship, real or imagined, her brain would flood with thoughts like, did I offend them? Do they think I'm too much? And, just those thoughts would send her into a panic, basically. And she told me that even the smallest sign of someone being distant, right, like a delayed text reply or a change in tone, could spiral her into hours of guilt, self doubt, and emotional overanalysis. She told me also that, especially before she had to give feedback, set a boundary, or express an opinion, she would mentally rehearse every word, every facial expression, trying to make sure she wouldn't come off the wrong way or hurt somebody's feelings. Okay, so she would basically imagine all of the ways someone might misunderstand her. She thinks she was selfish or believes she didn't care enough, and that fear would cause her to freeze or withdraw. Okay, and it became a pretty self-fulfilling cycle. So what I did is I helped Susie uncover the subconscious rules that were fueling all of that inner pressure. So we used a unique process, and we discovered that some of Sandy's core subconscious rules were I should always make sure that no one is ever upset at me. I should always do what someone asks. I should always be in control of how others perceive me. I should not impose anything on anyone ever. And also, others should never raise their voice or change their energy around me. Okay. So, can you relate to any of these? Okay. Now, to be clear, these were not just passing thoughts that Sandy had from time to time, although she certainly might have said some of these to herself every once in a while. These were basically deep rooted subconscious rules about how life had to be in order for her to feel calm and comfortable. And chances are that some of those beliefs are ones that you've been holding on to subconsciously too. You probably didn't even realize these were beliefs running in the background of your mind. And that's basically the point. I mean, they're subconscious, but these are probably some of the very beliefs quietly driving your anxiety every day. So, this means that Sandy had, like we all do, a set of subconscious rules about what had to happen in order to feel calm, feel comfortable, and live life, or to even make it remotely possible to feel peace of mind. So that meant in order for her to go to work, talk to her boss, interact with her husband, be around friends, those rules had to be met. And if they weren't, she couldn't function very well. She would feel basically unable to move forward. And that really is the key to understand that most people get wrong. It is not enough to acknowledge that you have unrealistic expectations. Okay, everybody does that. Every person with anxiety knows they've got unrealistic expectations. Everybody. Okay, every person with people pleasing anxiety especially knows that they've got unrealistic expectations and that they should let go of their rules. But they also, try as they might, feel in their core that they just can't do it. And that's the power of the subconscious. Okay, these rules are hardwired into your nervous system, into your operating system in a very real way. So knowing that you shouldn't be governed by the rules is never enough to actually make the change last. It's just not enough. Until those rules are actually rewired, people are automatically governed by those subconscious rules. And so, this is why we have to stop relying on coping mechanisms and start implementing conditioning mechanisms to retrain the brain, or else the anxiety, I mean, hell, it's always going to be there basically, and that becomes a big problem. So, in Sandy's case, the rules she had for her relationship with her daughter were being followed, so she felt peace of mind there. But that was primarily because her daughter didn't trigger her people pleasing rules very much. Her daughter was, never really upset with her, was always in constant communication, right? But when it came to other relationships, like at work with her husband, those subconscious rules were being violated consistently. And so she felt anxious regularly, right? And what I had to teach Sandy in order for her to overcome her people pleasing anxiety was what every person who truly wants to do the same has to learn. And that is, how do we rewrite the rules of the subconscious game that your mind is playing to make it winnable? Okay, now what exactly does that mean? Well, let's take this formula for peace of mind idea and take it just a little step further. So I want you to imagine that you are playing a board game for the very first time. So in order to play the board game, you basically need to know two things. Okay, you need to know the goals of the game, and you need to know the rules of the game. Okay, now if you follow the rules on how to accomplish the goals, you win. If you fail to follow the rules and you do not accomplish the goals, then you lose. Okay. Well, what if I told you that you have been subconsciously playing your own game of life according to a simple set of rules ever since you were a kid? And even more than that, every moment of your life, your subconscious is trying to win that game. Okay. So when you feel like you are winning, you feel happy and you have zero anxious thoughts. When you feel like you are losing, you experience anxiety. Okay. So let's return to Sandy to show you how this works. So for Sandy, within a few hours, I helped her uncover all of her anxiety causing subconscious beliefs. Now, Sandy had been dealing with this people pleasing anxiety for as long as she could remember, and that's basically how it goes for most people who deal with it, not always, but usually. And so therefore I knew that I had to ask a few key questions to uncover the deep core of where the anxiety was emanating from. So first I asked her, growing up, whose love did you crave more, your mother's or your father's? Okay, now you're going to be asking yourself the same question that I asked Sandy. And as a hint, it's usually the person whose love was least freely available. Okay. So she had said her mother's. And so the next key question I asked her was, okay, well, who was it that you felt that you had to be for your mother? And so she had to think about that for a second. And a couple answers came to mind. And so she basically said, I had to listen, I had to obey, I had to be a good girl. And I said, okay, well, what did being a good girl mean to your mother? So that's when Sandy told me, well, it was pretty impossible to tell. It varied from day to day. Sometimes she would want me to be talkative, other times she would want me to be quiet. It really depended on her mood, and she was kind of up and down all over the place. And so what I said to Sandy is I said, gotcha. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you felt like you had to basically monitor your mother's feelings moment by moment, anticipate what she was thinking, what she wanted, and what she was feeling, and then act in a way that would please her as opposed to upset her. And basically, you tried to do anything you could to avoid upsetting her. And Sandy said, yeah, that's absolutely right. And so what I did is I explained to Sandy that her mind did what all minds do. It developed a pattern to try to protect her. So what most people have no clue of, they have no clue that this is driving them, but the strongest urge in the psyche of all of us, especially when we're children, is to do whatever we must do to ensure that we maintain the love of our parents. This is like the strongest psychological urge for us when we're growing up. And why is that? Well, it's basically because humans are the only animals, if you think about it, on the planet where we rely on our parents to put our needs above their own for a very long period of time in order for us to survive, right? Like birds can, after a couple days or weeks, they can fly the coop and be fine, right? The mom doesn't have to love them forever. But when it comes to human beings, like the chance of a 1 year old, 2 year old, 5 year old surviving in the wild is 0%. Our species evolved to get where it is because sounds kind of cheesy to say, but because we love each other, right? Like we need our parents to love us, which, if you think about what love is, it really is just putting somebody else's needs above your own. We need them to put our needs above theirs for a really long period of time or else we die, right? And that's been coded into our DNA. And so if you think about it, while you might be living in the 21st century, the brain in your skull is about 300,000 years old, running the same default program of survival until we learn how to upgrade it, right? And so we're deathly afraid that our parents are going to not love us. And we're afraid if they don't love us, they're going to abandon us. And if they abandon us, we're going to die. So as a child, we become highly, highly susceptible to paying very, very close attention to any little signal that we get from our parent that indicates that they're pulling love away from us. So if they are pulling love away from us, our mind is on high alert trying to figure out what we did to make that happen. And our subconscious becomes trained to not do that thing anymore. And whenever we are doing something that seems to get our parents to give us more love, or at least attention, our subconscious becomes trained to do more of that thing. And when you grow up with a parent who seems to vary what their expectations are of you moment by moment, and they are highly reactive when you do something that upsets them, most of us develop a protective pattern that says, I need to know what they need in advance. And at all costs, I must avoid making them upset. This was the exact same pattern I developed as a kid in response to my stepfather, especially. Okay. And this is one of the big things that I had to learn how to overcome. So, in short, what happened over time was Sandy's mind became programmed to prioritize and chase after a certain set of values. And what I helped her uncover was that her nervous system was basically wired to chase after the following items in this order. Number one, approval. That was the most important. Number two, safety. Number three, good enough, trying to feel good enough about herself. Number four, calm. Number five, happy. So, what that basically means is that the subconscious rule book, as a metaphor, for her game of life was basically I have to get others' approval. I have to. If I don't, if I don't get their approval, I just really can't think straight. I can't function. And I'm not going to be able to function until I get back into an environment or a state of confidence that they do approve of me again. It's going to be on my mind, taking up space in my head until I know for sure that they approve. And only if I get their approval is it even remotely possible for me to feel safety, although I need other things in order to feel safe as well. And if I have approval and safety, then my next highest concern is making sure that I feel good enough, which again is impossible to feel unless I have approval first, right? If I could just somehow feel others' approval, feel safe, and feel good enough, then I would finally feel calm. And then and only then would I really be able to feel happy. So you see, if you put all of our rules together, okay, what you get is a rule book. And what we call that rule book is a model of how the world should be, right? And one of the strongest parts of that model of the world is who we must be in order to be good enough and in order to be loved. Okay, so some of us come to believe that we must be perfect. Some of us come to believe that we must be achievers. Some of us come to believe that we have to solve other people's problems. And some of us come to believe that we have to become pleasers. And basically, what happens is when our life matches up with our subconscious model of how the world should be, our rule book, in other words, we feel peaceful and happy. And when life does not match up with our subconscious model of how the world should be for a moment, if it only mismatches for a moment, we'll feel frustrated or sad. When we feel like life substantially, consistently does not match up with our subconscious model of the world, then we feel the sensation of anxiety as our mind struggles to try to balance that formula out. And then when we conclude that life is never going to match our subconscious model of how the world should be, we feel depressed. That's it. That's where all anxiety and depression comes from. In my 8 years of doing this professionally, 612 successful recoveries later, I've never seen an exception to this. And this explains why Sandy felt anxious for basically her entire life because her mind was basically subconsciously trying to find a way to get herself to match up with the mental rule book that said, I got to please everybody. And, she basically came to believe that that was who she had to be. So I'm curious if you can relate to Sandy's stories. More than likely you can. And I want to ask you, what do you think is the likelihood that Sandy will be able to consistently have her life match up with the set of rules that her mind created, right? What are the chances that Sandy's going to be able to have everybody's approval consistently? Basically about 0%, right? So in other words, her mind wrote a set of rules that made her version of the game of life completely unwinnable. And as a result of her mind requiring things that were never going to happen in order to function or focus on anything else, her mind continuously felt anxious. So imagine if I sat you down in a chair, I made you play a board game. You cannot leave from the chair until you win this board game. You must try your hardest to win the board game, but the only way you can win is if you make zero mistakes and everyone else playing the game approves of your every move while you make it. Could you see how anxiety inducing that would be? That's all people pleasing anxiety is. So, what I want you to remember for the rest of your life is this, because this will make everything in your life so much easier and getting rid of your anxiety will be so simpler. What you got to remember is anxiety is nothing more than your mind trying to win an unwinnable subconscious game. That is it. For Sandy, her brain was perpetually going, I have to please everybody. Ooh, but I can't. But I have to. Ooh, but I can't. Ooh, but I have to. But I can't. But I have to. But I can't. That spiraling process, it's like a dog chasing its own tail of constantly trying to please people when they're not pleasable all the time. That's what creates anxiety, us chasing our own tail like that. And when we have a set of subconscious rules wired into our mind that are unwinnable, we end up doing that perpetually. And what that means is this: until you identify the subconscious rules your mind is operating by and rewire them, you will always have anxiety. But once you do uncover the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by, and you rewire your mind to follow a new set of obtainable rules automatically, the anxiety will disappear. Okay. Or at least it's only ever always worked when when other people have done it, when I've seen them implement it. Okay. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I've only shared some of the most important parts of Sandy's subconscious rules that she had. There were dozens more that were causing her anxiety. I've never seen any two people pleasing anxiety cases where the underlying beliefs were 100% the same. And it's very important that you identify each and every one of your subconscious rules. Otherwise, if we leave even one anxiety causing subconscious rule hanging out in underneath the surface of your brain, then there's always a very high likelihood of relapse. So we have to identify every single one of them. Okay. Now, if our job is to do that, to rewire the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by, let's ask ourselves, is that going to happen, by us just talking for hours and hours every week, about your childhood, your triggers, your feelings in a therapy session? Is that going to do it? Is it going to happen by us screwing with the chemicals in your brain, numbing yourself, basically? Are we going to get that by just allowing the anxiety to exist and letting it pass by, like DBT would recommend? Are we going to get that by just trying to white knuckle it basically and do some exposure therapy? Are we going to be able to do this by just trying to jam as much positive thinking as we can in our head and just basically tell ourselves to be kinder to ourselves? Are we going to get this by meditating every day or journaling about our feelings or staring at ourselves in the mirror and reminding ourselves to be kind and practice self-acceptance? No. No, it is not, because every single one of these strategies is simply a way to respond to the anxious thoughts, not a way to prevent them from taking place. So that's why you got to be sure to make sure you remember this. The only way to get the anxious thoughts to disappear is to rewire the unwinnable rules in the subconscious. Okay, so here's a different way of thinking about this. So when Sandy's subconscious belief was, if I don't please everyone, I cannot feel good enough about myself or even function. That was a core subconscious belief wired into her brain starting at childhood. And you could think of that as being almost like the trunk of a tree. Okay. Now that trunk is going to sprout all of these little branches, all of these little anxious thoughts from it, like, did I say something wrong? What are they thinking of me? I totally made a fool of myself. Did I offend them? Will they ever forgive me? And like 100 other variations of that. Okay. So we can use coping mechanisms to try to trim all of the tiny branches one by one to temporarily forget that they are there. I mean, that would be one option of how we would do things. Or what we could do is we could just chop the freaking trunk of the tree down. Okay. That would be the better option. And by doing it that way, we don't have to focus on 100 different anxious thoughts every day for the rest of our lives using coping mechanisms. All we have to do is three things. Number one, identify every anxiety causing belief, otherwise known as a rule. Number two, eliminate the unwinnable rules or beliefs, same difference. And then three, retrain the brain to follow a winnable set of rules by default. Okay, not intellectually become aware that we need to do things differently. Train the brain to do it differently by default. Okay, now when we finished that process with Sandy, her mind was automatically chasing after a totally different set of values that was actually obtainable, such as growth, number one, self love, number two, confidence, number three, fun, number four. And she was doing so according to a set of rules that we had her mind automatically wired to follow, which was really, really cool. So for growth, some of just a sampling of some of her new rules were, as long as I try my best, that is really, truly plenty enough. Number two, as long as I am making some progress, that is success. Okay, those were some of her new rules for growth. For self-love, some of the rules were, when I lovingly set a boundary, that is an act of self-love. Also, I will no longer tolerate trying to please anybody. I will simply do something with a good intention and trust that good things are going to follow. And then finally, as a sample, if we look at the rules for fun, one of her rules for fun was, I can have fun anytime, anywhere with anyone just by choosing it. Okay, so now remember, again, I want to point this out because this is very, very critical to understand. It's never, ever enough to just like write this stuff down or become aware of it. People have done this all the time. Like, you've probably had conversations in your own head where you're like, you know what? I just need to be kind to myself. I need to practice self-love. I just need to try my best. Okay, becoming intellectually aware is nowhere near sufficient to get you the change. So, for instance, everyone with people pleasing anxiety has told themselves, I have to stop trying to please everybody before, but they haven't been able to get their mind to actually believe that in their bones and stop compulsively trying to do it. That's where the rewiring process comes in. And that's why the process of conditioning the mind to follow the new rules by default is the secret sauce almost everyone gets wrong. Okay. So by doing it this way, Sandy no longer had to do any daily maintenance. She no longer had to have coping mechanisms to respond to her anxious thoughts. She didn't need to meditate because there were no thoughts to try to get rid of anymore. And that rules out, again, all of the strategies that everyone else is teaching. Now, there are three things that most people get wrong when they try this on their own. And our copycats make these mistakes every time when they try to teach this to their clients. So, the first thing that people get wrong is they never identify each and every one of the subconscious anxiety causing beliefs. So, there are always a handful of really obvious ones. But most anxiety is actually caused by the dozens of imperceptible ones, like if someone doesn't keep good eye contact with me after I make a comment, then they must be upset with me. So, like the really nuanced, specific stuff like that is basically impossible to kind of figure out on your own. It's really challenging to do that. So we have to use a special process to identify all of those nuanced ones. The second thing is that they don't properly learn how to get the mind to really release and eliminate the anxiety causing beliefs. So it's one thing to become consciously aware that your mind is holding on to rules that don't make sense. It's another thing entirely to train the brain to stop compulsively following those rules by default, right? And then third, they don't properly condition the brain to follow the new set of rules by default. It's not enough to list them out on a piece of paper or just simply become aware of what you want them to be. You have to hardwire the brain to follow them by default to avoid a lifetime of coping. Okay, but the cool thing is when you do this properly, there is really no more need for coping skills because the source of the anxious thoughts has finally been dealt with for once and for all. And the reason why this is so cool is you don't have time for coping, right? We want to just do this in about 90 days. We don't want to spend years on this. We don't want to spend all this time analyzing and dissecting and ruminating. We just want to get the brain rewired and get you back to living the life you have always wanted to, but anxiety has been keeping you from. Okay. And we cannot put you in a position where you are constantly responding to every anxious thought that comes up. Those strategies take forever and usually don't even work after years of trying them. Okay, so if you have anxiety, then it is a big problem now. It's affecting your marriage now. It's affecting your children now, whether you know it or you don't know it. Most parents think, "Oh, well, I never let my kids know that I'm anxious." They know that you're anxious, trust me. Okay, kids are much more susceptible to feeling what you feel rather than going off of what you say. So a lot of parents think, well, I never say that I'm anxious. I never let on that I'm anxious. Yeah, right. Like, remember when you were a kid, when your parents were arguing or upset or angry or sad, didn't you know it, even though your parents didn't say it out loud? Didn't it affect how you felt? Kids, it's been shown, it's been proven many, many times. Okay, kids are far more susceptible. They can feel it, and it starts impacting their mental health. In about 80% of the cases I've dealt with adolescent mental health challenges, it's usually a mental health issue that's going on with the parents that's been going on for a long time. So when the parents are all right, the kids are usually all right. So I'm telling you this because nobody else really points this out, but it's the truth. If you're dealing with anxiety, it is affecting your children and it's affecting them now. It's affecting your career, certainly, and your earning potential now, especially if it's people pleasing anxiety, definitely. And it's probably affecting even something basic like your sleep now, right? And your coworkers, your boss, your spouse, your kids, your family, your friends, they need you at your best now, right? So a lot of times with people pleasing anxiety people, they believe that they have to put themselves lowest on the totem pole and take care of everybody else first. But the thing they fail to realize is putting themselves last is actually the most selfish thing you could possibly do because dealing with your anxiety first is the number one thing that's going to make everybody else's quality of life and better around you because your anxiety is affecting everyone around you. Okay. The thing is, you don't have time to spend a ton of time hoping that 6 months of some new therapy is going to work. You could very legitimately end up losing your marriage or your career by then, and it certainly is going to be affecting your kids in a deeper level by then. So, how do we do this in such a short period of time? What does that really look like? What are the steps that you need to follow? Well, what you want to do is imagine you've got a board game that you're frustrated with. You keep trying to play it, but you keep losing, right? So you come to me here, and we've got this spiffy little checklist that we can use to identify each and every one of the problems that's making the game unwinnable, right? Then we systematically rewrite the rules so your mind automatically follows the right guidelines. Okay. So all we got to do is number one, uncover your existing set of subconscious rules. After all, we cannot change something that we don't even know exists in the first place. And we don't have to guess, right? After seeing so many hundreds of anxiety cases, it's very easy to predict and identify the underlying beliefs causing the issue. Most people have, on average, 25 to 30 subconscious anxiety causing beliefs. The big obvious ones are usually identifiable very easily. They're like the top three or four, but the lion's share of anxiety is created by all of the little nuanced ones. Okay, and then what we got to do is we have to go through the checklist of the 7 types of subconscious rules that cause anxiety. And we systematically remove all of the old rules that are causing you to lose. Okay. And now we actually set you up with what you need to be able to play a winnable game. We set out what your new belief system needs to be in order to ensure that you get the life that you desire. Okay. And we use conditioning strategies, not coping strategies, but conditioning strategies to train the brain to adopt the new rules by default. So you don't have to even think about it anymore. Okay. And a couple of reasons why this is way more awesome and works so much better than what's being used out there by most people is that this is a proven process, firstly. Okay. I've been teaching this successfully and consistently for 8 years. And that's why we've become an industry leader, and others have been taking notice. One quote from molecular psychiatry is studies support that anxiety is a learned response and it can be unlearned through brain retraining techniques. A quote from the University of College London is, our research shows that with the right tools, the brain can be conditioned to respond differently to anxiety, enabling long-term relief. Okay. This is also awesome because it takes you from deeply anxious to anxiety free in just a matter of a few months, right? Even with extreme anxiety, it's really always just a matter of identify, eliminate, and rewire. That's it. Okay. You also never have to worry about managing your anxious thoughts ever again because you are dismantling the underlying beliefs that are causing them in the first place. Additionally, there are no band-aid solutions. There's no dredging up tons of drama from the past. There's no talking in circles. There's no uncomfortable exposure. There's no excessive use of willpower to just push through. No more repression. Okay, rather than feeling like you are adding more things that you have to do to manage your anxiety and get through the day, now you're actually in the process of letting things go, which is so much more relieving. It's like finding all of the pebbles in your shoe and removing them instead of just taking painkillers on top of it to try to be able to walk. Okay. Another reason this is awesome is it doesn't make you reliant on a therapist or a prescription or anyone else, right? You now are playing the game of life basically from the inside out, where you are in charge of how you feel instead of the outside in, where you require things outside of your control to go a certain way so that that way you can feel okay. Okay. Also, you learn a set of skills you will never forget. It's hardwired into you, right? You become, therefore, immune to relapse because you now know how to keep from adopting any more limiting subconscious beliefs in the future. Not only that, but your brain is now working for you automatically just as strongly as up until now it's been working against you. So instead of having automatic negative thoughts, you're now having automatic positive thoughts. So just as strongly as your anxiety is now, imagine the power of that working for you, right? That's the real beauty of that. And the beauty of this too is this set of skills that you learn is something you can teach your spouse, you can teach your kids. We have clients all the time who literally break generational cycles of mental health issues in their families. And rather than the vicious cycle of anxiety where everything in your life becomes more difficult and more exhausting and more overwhelming and it affects your career and your parenting and your marriage, Now you're doing the virtuous cycle where everything gets easier and you're able to focus more and your energy returns and everything starts to get easier and it compounds on itself in a positive way, which is a really powerful thing. So it is very routine for people to go through our process, use this method, and then their physical health improves, their marriage improves, their career improves, all within about 6 to 12 months. Because it's like changing the fuel that you're putting in the car, right? You're changing the dominant emotion you feel on a regular basis. When you're feeling anxious and overwhelmed all the time, do you think you're going to be the most effective at parenting? Do you think if you're anxious and overwhelmed all the time, you're going to be a very effective professional? No, but not by a long shot, right? So that's a really powerful thing as well. And I really want you to think like, can you see how powerful this is? Like, I want you to imagine for a moment the relief that would come from eliminating all of the anxiety causing beliefs that you have collected over the years. Imagine what would finally be possible. Because what most people don't realize is anxiety causing subconscious beliefs are like an emergency brake being pulled, right? So you basically are slowed down permanently and you keep trying to jam on the gas to get what you want out of life. And you keep going, man, that emergency brake is making life difficult for me, but I don't have time to deal with that. I just got to keep laying on the gas. As opposed to realizing if you were to just release the emergency brake, oh my gosh, everything gets freed up. The problem is people don't know how to do that because it's happening at the subconscious level, right? And that's the key. So our copycats always mess up the subconscious belief identification part as well as the elimination and replacement part. Okay. And that means, what they end up doing is they end up providing surface level strategies that simply help people respond to and manage their thoughts rather than keeping them from coming back in the first place. And that basically just creates a lifetime of coping again. But I want you to understand if you do this the right way, this has worked to not only keep myself free from anxiety for 15 years since I was hospitalized, but in the past 8 years, we've done this with 612 people just like you. And it's going to keep working for another 8 years because the human brain doesn't really change that much. I've done this with clients as young as 13, as old as 84. Doesn't matter how long you've struggled, doesn't matter how severe it is, doesn't matter what kind of anxiety you're dealing with. Most people aren't dealing with just people pleasing anxiety, and that doesn't matter, right? We can always root out the subconscious beliefs that are causing the problem for each individual person. And so if you've been looking at all of the coping strategies and the feel good content out there, but it just kind of leaves you feeling empty, like there's a piece missing. And if part of you keeps feeling like, gosh, I really don't want to deal with this forever. I really want to be normal again. Can someone please just give me something tangible and common sense that I can implement right away? Then I'm telling you, there is a way to get your brain to feel content and think positively by default in just about 12 weeks without having to rely on ineffective coping mechanisms and without being dependent on anything or anyone long term. And that's why I've been in business for 8 years and why we have the best track record of results in the industry. We don't get sucked into the fads. We don't get sucked into the trends. We don't try to hack the social media algorithm. We don't prioritize clicks and views over transformation. We have built our entire methodology on what does not change, and that's human psychology. And we make our clients feel taken care of from start to finish. And that's how we're able to take them from feeling deeply anxious on day one to automatically feeling content and thinking positively in just 90 days or less. So, now you do have an opportunity and a choice in front of you. You can keep trying to do these coping mechanisms that don't work, that you don't like, and that you've already been trying for who knows how long. You can keep doing the same thing and hoping that something changes, which is the definition of insanity, of course, right? I did it too, I did it for years. You can keep hoping something changes on its own, but we all know that hope is not a good strategy. It's not a strategy at all, actually. Hoping that something gets better is really, without intending to, it's delegating the responsibility and the power to something or someone else instead of being the one in control of where your life and mental health is going, right? And you can rationalize that now isn't the right time to do this and allow yourself to kick back onto autopilot where you just keep pressing on the gas, pressing on the gas, pressing on the gas. Meanwhile, that emergency brake is there, slowing you down, keeping you immobilized. Um, you can keep doing that, you know what I mean? But running your engine into the ground if you want, and letting yourself be convinced that putting yourself last is what's going to serve everybody around you when it's really, frankly, the selfish thing to do. And the best thing you could possibly do for everybody else is to finally give yourself the mental health that you deserve. I mean, after all, right? Like, it is just your life we are talking about here, right? It's your life, right? You only get one of them. You only get one of today, only one of this year. You don't get any redos. So, do we want another 12 months to go by where the anxiety is holding you back, right? And impacting everybody that you love? I don't think so. But if you are serious, if you really do want to get the mental health you deserve, and you deserve to do it, I mean, it's completely obtainable. And if you want to do it just like hundreds of other people have done it, we are here. We're happy to help you and assist you to do that. I have set aside a little bit of time on my calendar in the next 24 to 48 hours to speak with you personally about how you can apply these ideas for your specific situation, for your mental health today. Okay, so on the call, we're going to get a lot done in a short period of time. Firstly, I'm going to help you identify what the subconscious beliefs are that are causing the anxiety for you. Number two, I'm going to help you identify the ones that you need to replace them with. Okay, because that's very important. Number three, I'm also going to help you get clear on the 2 to 3 conditioning strategies that your nervous system is going to respond best to. There's 3 different types of nervous systems, and a lot of people use the wrong strategies that are mismatched for them, and that's part of why they don't get great results. So we'll speed things up for you there. And then finally, I'm going to make sure I hand you a proven roadmap to lasting recovery and relapse prevention. So it is just a phone call. It's not very long. I'm going to show you the exact steps you can take to overcome the anxiety for once and for all. And I'm going to custom make for you a roadmap to live every day with calm, peace, joy, the ability to be present for the ones you love. Okay, pretty cool, right? And basically, my goal is literally to convince you I can help you by actually helping you. Okay, is that fair enough? I mean, my promise is basically that this call is going to shave years of your learning curve off to finally getting the mental health you deserve and that you desire. And that's the reason we do this. We want to make sure that you're not getting pulled astray by any of these outdated tactics that don't work. And we want to make sure that you're using the stuff that's proven, that's tried, true, that beautifully sets you up to make sure that your mind stops having the automatic anxious thoughts for good and to finally feel comfortable inside your own skin like you deserve, right? I recently had a gentleman who had watched a couple of my videos and then signed up for a call, and he left this comment on my website after he watched, or excuse me, after he did his call, and he said, I can't tell you how many times you've said something I have felt on an atomic level. This is what I've been craving for years from therapy and never received. Okay. Now, these calls are completely, totally free, but there is a catch. Okay. So, who this is for, this is only for people where dealing with your anxiety is a must. Okay. And you know who you are. Like, if you're one of those people where you're just kind of, yeah, I don't really care. I mean, the anxiety, it would be great to get it dealt with, but who cares? If you're in that mode, don't book a call, okay? Because you're not going to make any changes anyway. You've got to get into a mentality of getting the anxiety dealt with is a must. It's time to rip the band-aid off. Um, and the reason is we just want to help the people who really, really want it and who really need it. You know what I mean? Because every time people implement what we teach them, lives change. And we don't want any appointments going to somebody who's not motivated enough to actually apply what we teach them. And on that same front, you got to be coachable and you must be willing to implement. If you're just one of those people that's trying to gather a bunch of information and you're not looking to do anything with it, just don't bother, right? It's a waste of everybody's time. I only want to spend my time helping people who are actually going to use what I teach them. So just make sure that that's you before you book an appointment. So below this video, you'll see a button you can click to book a call, or if you're watching this on social media and you see a comment section below, just go ahead and comment with the word session. And if you're on social media, we'll go ahead and we'll reach out to you. We'll book an appointment one-on-one that way. But if you see a button below the video, you can go ahead and do that. Once you do that, you'll see a little window that'll look like this that'll open up. It'll take you to a booking page. You can choose an appointment that works for you, and I'll call you at that time. Spaces are very limited. The calendar fills up very fast, so just make sure you go ahead and grab your spot right now, okay? And thank you for hanging out with me today. And listen, the ability that I've showed you how to identify, eliminate, replace the anxiety-causing beliefs in the subconscious. It is the single most important thing that you can learn how to do to live a life without anxiety. You can spend the next 5 years trying to cope, trying to use the coping mechanisms that have already been proven to be ineffective, that the data shows are ineffective. You can hope something changes on its own. You can wait for some magic moment where you feel like everything is just right, or justify, oh, you know what? I just need to take care of this one little thing and then I'm going to take care of my anxiety. When we all know that you've said that to yourself 100 times, right? You've come up with that one extra thing 1,000 times. So you got to break that pattern of saying, oh, just that one little thing and then I'm going to take care of myself, right? You can keep doing that and you can let that pattern run you on autopilot for another 12 months. Um, or you can just start using this simple common sense approach, right? You can start using this simple, common, proven approach that it's so dead simple, and anybody who uses it is it's going to work for. But you've just got to take a couple baby steps. Okay. There's no crutches, no band-aid solutions, no roundabout passive strategies, no temporary pump up BS. Just rewiring the brain to think positively by default in a way that sets you up for a lifetime without anxiety, so you can show up for those that you love in the way that they are really craving to see you. Okay. So, all right. I'm Ty Hicks. Click the button under the video to book that call, or if you're on social media, just type session below. I'll see you when we talk soon. Take care.